Hey everybody, I thought I would do kind of a quick rundown video of my setup with an app called Loopy. This is something that I use now in the cover band that I'm in, Ultraviolet, and I also use for solo gigs. It's sort of become the heart and soul of my setup. So behind me here, you see two iPads. One is an iPad Air V5 with I think it's an M1 processor that is running the app that you see here, Loopy. And the other one is a control app. This is a very old iPad. I don't know what version it is, but it's from the 2010 or so. That is basically just controlling my outboard XR18, which is my interface to get in and out of Loopy. First thing you see with Loopy here is you see a bunch of sort of donuts or circles, and you also see a bunch of different colors. And what Loopy allows you to do is to break your different signals down into different colors. So in this particular setup, I have acoustic guitars running through oranges, electric guitars running through greens, bass or subharmonic synth running through blue, and what do I have coming through purple? Purple is keyboards, regular synth, red is drums, and then finally yellow is vocals. So what you can do is you can process all of those independently. So you can mix them, you can bring them in and out, and really it becomes quite powerful when you're doing a setup and sort of like layering loops on top of each other and coming up with different sections of a song. I'll try to demonstrate that in a minute. I've been playing around with loopers for about 25 years or so, and I think of looping as, at least my experience with it, as falling into sort of three different types or categories. The first and the one that is kind of been around the longest, I think, is free looping. So free looping to me is when you start and stop a loop with simply a foot switch tap. And I'll show you later, I have a Behringer FCB 1010 MIDI foot controller, which connects to all this other stuff here. And that is how I foot trigger loops coming in and out. So free looping. The second type is metronome-based looping. Now, in metronome-based looping, you have a click track. You need a click track. And then all of the loops, their length and their in and out points is defined by that click track. And this is something that Loopy didn't create, but it's kind of, for me, really changed my thoughts about the kinds of things you could do with looping. So in metronome-based looping, I'll show an example of that. You have a session set up that's set to a tempo, and you have loops that are set up to a predefined length. And then when you start and stop them, they're all going to come in and come out in relation to that predefined metronome piece. And the last kind, which is the most I think sort of the most sort of new, avant-garde, revolutionary is sequence-based looping. And if you've ever seen videos by Elise, I'm not sure how you say her last name, Churro or something like that, she's really made those very popular. And that is where you sort of, you loop, but it's based on a sequence timeline. So you almost define this blank timeline with no audio in it, but all of the button clicks and all the triggers and all the mixing and automation built right in. So Loopy can do all three of these. And I think one of the things that sometimes gets lost in some of the conversations about it that I've seen online is that it can just function as a very simple free looping type setup, much like somebody would have had with like a Boss RC20 or a loop station or something like that. So let me start and demonstrate some free looping with Loopy. I'm going to call up a session called From Me, which is a tune of mine off my first record. So I'm not going to play this whole song, but I'll give you a little sense of what, how I would do this and some of the things that I could do with this. So the basic groove of this tune goes like this. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to press a record button on the downbeat, and then once it comes back around again, I'm going to press that same button and create a free loop of this particular track. So here we go. Okay, so you can hear that now is repeating, and I'm obviously not playing anything, so it allows me to could also lay a bass on top of it. I use a subharmonic synth for that, which basically takes the pitch of the guitar, drops it down an octave. So I'll do that. Could also overdub on top of that. So that is free looping. I didn't determine ahead of time the length of those loops. I didn't determine the tempo of those loops ahead of time. So I can simply clear that session. Next type of looping I want to show is what I called metronome-based looping, and I'm going to use a song that a cover song that I perform with the cover band I'm in, Ultraviolet. This is a Lizzo tune called Juice. Now, one of the things that you don't hear in your audio, but I do hear, is I hear a metronome track in here. And in the middle of the last piece, I was actually futzing to shut that off because it comes on. I forgot that I had it enabled on that. But so the metronome gives me the tempo of the piece before I start to play it. And that, I think, when you're talking about something like this, like metronome-based looping and syncing with drummers and really like bringing loops in and out and having them just come out perfectly right on the downbeat, it becomes more and more of a necessity. We used to do some free looping in Ultraviolet, and it was hit and miss. Sometimes I would just hit that button at the perfect time and we could keep the drums in time with it. Other times, it would become kind of a disaster when we were looping. So with metronome-based looping, everybody in the band gets a copy of that click. So as long as people can play to a click track, people can stay in time with what you're doing. Okay, so this is Lizzo's Juice. I'm going to start by, on my floor pedal, clicking start on the metronome. I can hear it in here. You can't hear it out there. If we look over here, up here in the corner, you'll see the tempo that's been predefined. These are some notes I have on here about like playing this song with a loop. And it's slowly tracing a circle around that metronome. And I know that I have to come in at the top of that. And when I hit record on a loop, as you see, this was counting me in to come in right at the top. So here we go. Add some bass. Now I've got a bass part and a chorus part that are coming in at the same time. I do a little improv over it. and then the verse starts. When I'm ready with the chorus, I press a button. When I'm ready with the post-chorus, add another layer. I get the full loop. So what's important to know about that is that I'm not pressing that Cue Next section button right on the downbeat. I'm pressing it, as long as it's within the whatever that loop circle is, if it's 2 bars or 4 bars, as long as it's within that minimum time, I can press a button to cue the next section, and it doesn't do it right away. It'll wait till the top of that circle before having it come in. So so that's an example of what I would call metronome-based looping. I'm going to bring up another song of mine here to just show, give an example of timeline-based looping. Going to switch to electric on this one. Okay, you can see from here there's quite a bit in here. There's some pre-recorded loops, there's some drums and some other things that are happening in here. Most of the things I'll be adding are the green loops, the guitars, and then I have some other loops out here that are yellow that I call dummy loops because they don't actually have any audio in them, but they have what are called follow actions. And follow actions are a way in Loopy to tell it to do something after that loop. So it can mute something, it can turn something up, it can turn it down, it can switch an effect on, it can do almost any function in there. So follow actions are a really powerful way to sort of automate what you're doing when you create a sequence-based loop. So this is, I'll play like just a little bit of this, a tune of mine called As Good As It Gets, but you'll see a couple guitar loops, and then I'll also put in a subharmonic bass loop in this.
She knew better, but knew we couldn't do any better than this. It wasn't perfect. Looked around to show me something that is. There's a day you see it clear. There's a time you stop making bets. He didn't say it, but knew it was as good as it gets. He knew better, but knew he was his own worst distraction. He lacked a balance, just to see if he could get a reaction. There's a day you look in the mirror, just to see if it still reflects. He didn't say it, but knew it was as good as it gets.
Okay, so I shut that off there for a second. Take it off sequence mode here, and you could hear the different loops I put in. Didn't have to press any buttons, didn't have to do anything because it's all pre-programmed in the sequence. So let me just start. First thing I brought in was this guitar loop. Then I brought in, or I should say, when I say brought in, I mean recorded. This was my second loop that I recorded. This was the third loop that I recorded. And this was the bass part that I recorded. So let me show you what that looks like in a when you program it in sequencing mode. A little button down here, and you basically draw in and out where all you want your various loops to be. And the really cool thing, if I clear them all, and just start this again. See how these loops continue? As soon as I record the first one, it populates in all the rest of these. So it's going to play just as long on this timeline until I tell it to shut off over here. And that's pretty it's pretty powerful in terms of like the types of things you could do with looping if you didn't have to worry about doing all the button presses. And the more complicated setup that you get with something like this, the more the button presses like just take you out of the song and take you out of the performance. And I kind of feel like it just removes a lot of the fun from performing. So this is probably what I'm going to tend to more often here. Let me show you a few other things that I have in here before I show you about gear and whatnot. So for guitar, I run a program called Bias. And so Bias is kind of running in the background at all times. I use this little controller up here to switch between different bias patches. I also can switch those inside of Loopy by sending a MIDI control change to bias effects. Also in this, let me get rid of the guitar here for a sec. Also in this, I have a keyboard setup that I haven't brought out live yet, but you know, does quite a bit. All of these apps are things that are running inside Loopy itself. So I have a synth called Audio Layer, which is basically a sampler, and I can pull various samples. Those are some things I took out of Ableton and some of the sessions I have in there. I've also got a great piano sample called Ravenscloth 275. 30 bucks. Really legitimate piano. Moving over one other zone. Galileo organ. Really pretty impressive drawbar type organ. And I have set up on my key controller here the ability to modify drawbars. Which is nice because it feels like you're playing, you know, an actual organ there. And the last thing I have, which is pretty fun, is an app called Bleef's Voices. It's a harmonizer app. So I have it set up to run this a lot like Imogen Heap uses, where she has her harmonizer tied to whatever MIDI notes come out of the keyboard. So I bring the harmonizer in on a foot pedal. You can hear the multiple voices come in here. And then if I play a chord, oh, 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 oh. So fun stuff. I haven't used that too much, but it's all of that is coming inside the iPad. So everything outside is simply a controller for that. You know, the guitar comes in through the audio interface and hits that bias effects app. The keyboard here comes in and hits one of those internal apps. But everything is processed through the iPad, through Loopy and some of the various apps that are connected to that. Let me show you a little bit about my external setup to make all of this happen. I have a Behringer XR18, which I run all of my audio and MIDI into. All of that comes in through a little USB cable, which comes out via a snake and goes out to my iPad. Before it gets to the iPad, actually the thing that's inside there that you can't see that is super necessary is a hub, a powered hub. So the output of that hub is what goes to the iPad, but into that hub I have the XR18. I also have long cables from the MIDI controllers I showed, you know, all of that gets powered by the hub and gets out to my iPad, my two iPads actually, and I don't need to worry about like them dying during a gig because they're constantly stay charged here. On the ground here, this is the Behringer FC 1010, two continuous controllers and 10 foot pedals. You know, this is a lot of loopers use this. It's kind of cost effective. It's a real pain in the ass to program, but once you have it set up, you don't need to touch it. All of the things, once I've had this set, I program all happen inside of Loopy. And then up here, I have an old Axiom 49 keyboard. I have this set up so that my different zones here call up different things inside of Loopy. These are the drawbars I was talking about earlier. And this is my other iPad, which controls the XR18. I know that has a plug into it, but that plug is just for power, so the control comes through just through Wi-Fi. So XR18 has kind of famously shitty Wi-Fi, so I put my own little Wi-Fi hub in there so I can get better reception. Here, this is like a $30 Akai controller. I basically use this for these buttons, help control my guitar presets. Don't use the rotor encoders because they're not continuous, and I just don't want to have jumps when I twist or turn those things. But it's a reasonable controller for just you know, either you could tap out drum beats on it or you can just call up presets, which is what I happen to do. That's about it for setup. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment. I'm kind of a nerd for this sort of stuff, so I don't mind chatting about it or giving specifics if you're really interested. I do have one other thing to share. Let me go grab it, and I'll be right back. The last thing I want to share is kind of a concern that hadn't occurred to me when I started performing with an iPad and having it sort of be a mission critical piece of gear, and that is heat. For many years, I used an iPad like this to control the XR18, but it was simply a control app Control apps don't require a lot of processor. I mean, it's just connecting through Wi-Fi and controlling, sending control messages. That doesn't tax your iPad too bad. A few times I had this thing shut down in full sun on an outdoor gig, but it was, an occasional thing. And again, we had a band, multiple iPads. If one shut down, as long as another one was working, we could continue to mix, or you could pull up a phone or do something like that. With Loopy, very different thing. Don't want it to shut down. And also, your iPad is doing a lot more processing when it's actually processing audio and running these audio apps. So it's going to run a lot hotter. And if you've ever held an iPhone or an iPad that's been out in the sun, they are passively cooled, which means that if they're not in a cool environment, they don't shed heat really well on their own. So I have 4 outdoor gigs. I have like my outdoor gig go bag here. I'm going to show you a few things out of it. One of them, $35 on Amazon, is a cooling pad. It basically plugs into a USB. My iPads sit on top of this. I sort of tilt this thing down so it's flatter. This sits on top of the stand. iPads sit on top of that, and these fans constantly blow. So they're circulating air all the time behind it, and that seems to help a little bit. The thing that I would say really is necessary if you're going to play a hot outdoor sun gig is some way to shade your iPad, because that is, ambient heat is definitely an issue, but that radiation, that direct sunlight, is what can heat those things up to the point where they cool down. So I found this on B&H Photo. This is it's a camera shade that you would basically, a photographer would use outside if they were taking photos, or and even it looks like the kind of thing you see like on the NFL instant replay sort of thing. So it folds down nice and flat here, like a camera, like a reflector or something like that. But when you open this up, make sure this doesn't pop out and smack me in the face, it unfolds into this like nice little piece here, that you can stick your iPad in. You really get 3 sides of shade, so as long as the sun isn't coming completely behind you, you're going to be okay. You also can sit your iPads back pretty far in this. What I will do is I'll take this stand over here, lay it flat, and then I take some small ratchet straps and strap this thing on top. I know it seems kind of flimsy right now, but when you strap that really tightly on top of that piece of metal, this will stand on its own, and has done a really good job through some full sun gigs to not have any iPad issues. And I think one of the things I've noticed with iPads is when they heat up, the battery starts to drain, and also sometimes you get glitches in the audio. I have seen the batteries continue to run at 100% in full sun through a 3-hour gig. So I think it's something that to me gives me a lot of peace of mind when I find out that the bar wants to have us play outside that day, that this this will help us do that. I think that one of the things prior to this that I often would confuse is sun protection and water protection. So water protection is something musicians know a lot about. It's kind of a necessary piece of any outdoor performance if you have electric gear. 2 different things though, because you can have a tent over you, okay, and the tent can protect you from the rain, but if it's 7 o'clock and that sun is coming in sideways, you still might be getting full sun in your iPad. This Ritz camera bag provides some rain protection. I mean, it's not like, if it was like a downpour, you'd need something else, but it provides some rain protection so you can get the other protection on. The thing that I use for rain protection, which honestly, has got me through 12 years of playing in a cover band and outdoor gigs every Sunday during the summertime, is clear plastic bags. It's not the most environmentally, safe or environmentally conscious alternative, but they work quite well if you have large size clear plastic bags, because you can wrap a pedal board in them and it protects not only from the top of the pedal board, but to the bottom. So if water is on the floor after you start playing, like after it rains, you have a wet surface that you're playing on, you're still not going to get water coming up into that stuff. And then at the end of the gig, you can just throw them out. As I said, it's not the best environmental solution, but it works quite well. You also can slide a bag like this right over a whole rig here. You can slide it right over a guitar stand like it is over here behind me. And in about 10 seconds, you have water protection in a downpour. So I think that's something that always comes with me. Those two things, though, heat protection and water protection, are really two independent things. And if you're performing with an iPad, it is mission critical to your performance that you have something for both of those instances if you're going to be playing outdoors. That's why I prefer to play indoor gigs. But anyway, any questions, leave them in the comment. Thanks, folks. Bye.